All right, let's talk about sleep. We all think we get it right. You feel tired, you hit the sack, you wake up. Simple enough. But what if I told you that's only half the picture? What if the reason you feel so exhausted has just as much to do with a kind of load meter as it does with a clock? Today, we're going to dive into a completely new dimension of sleep, one that finally explains why pure mental effort can feel so incredibly draining. I mean, really think about that for a second. Why does a day spent just staring at a screen, wrestling with a tough problem, leave you feeling physically wiped out? The old school biological clock model, it just doesn't have a great answer for that. It doesn't really factor in the load of your day. But trust me, by the end of this, you'll see exactly why it should. So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to cover the classic model, the master clock. Then, we'll introduce its other half, the brain's load meter. We'll see how they work together, we'll look for proof out in the animal kingdom, unpack a brand new discovery, and finally, we'll build a Rosetta Stone so you can translate all this new science into something you can actually use. Okay, first up, let's start on familiar ground. We're talking about the foundation of all modern sleep science, the famous circadian pacemaker. This is the one you probably remember from biology class. So, tucked away deep inside your brain, there's this tiny little cluster of cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. The best way to think of it is as the master conductor for your body's entire orchestra. It's the SCN's job to make sure everything, from your hormones to your body temp, is following that same roughly 24-hour beat. And how does this little conductor work? It's actually incredibly elegant. Its main cue, its input, comes from light signals that travel from your eyes. Then, on the inside, there's this amazing molecular feedback loop, using what are called clock genes that just ticks away. And the output? Well, that's what you feel. It directs the release of melatonin to get you sleepy and cortisol to wake you up. Simple, right? And look, we know this for a fact. The science here is rock solid. In lab experiments, if you remove an animal's SCN, its daily rhythms just fall apart completely. But here's the wild part. If you transplant a new SCN into that same animal, the rhythm comes right back. It's pretty much definitive proof. The SCN is the master clock, but it's not the whole story. So let's get to the other side of the equation. This second system, it's not a clock at all. It's much more like a load meter, and it's called the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM. So the BKM basically says that sleep isn't just about what time it is, it's also triggered by the physical buildup of strain in your brain tissue. Every single thing you do, every thought, every sound, every image you process creates a tiny, tiny bit of physical stress. Okay, here's the breakdown. All those daily inputs, they create what this model calls stress clouds. Now, your brain tissue is what's known as viscoelastic. You can kind of think of it like a really sophisticated memory foam. And as the day goes on, it gets saturated. It loses its ability to absorb any more strain. And once you cross that threshold, that's it. The brain flags it and triggers the need for sleep to reset and repair everything. So, which one is it? The clock or the load meter? Well, here's the big reveal. It's both. These aren't competing ideas. They are two different systems, two axes of regulation that are working together all the time. And this slide lays it out perfectly. You've got the circadian clock, that's your conductor, setting the general 24-hour schedule. But then you have the BKM, which is the load meter, managing your brain's real-time physical state. And it can absolutely trigger the need to sleep when you hit your limit, no matter what time the clock says it is. So if you take one thing away, let it be this. Your need for sleep isn't based on one question. Your body is constantly asking two. The clock is asking, what time is it? But the load meter is asking, how much strain are we under right now? And your actual need for sleep is found right at the intersection of those two answers. Okay, that's a cool idea, but is there any proof for this load concept? Well, to find it, we can take a look at the animal kingdom. It's a perfect laboratory for seeing how different sensory loads create wildly different sleep patterns. I mean, just look at this. It's fascinating. For humans, vision is king, so our sleep is naturally tied to light and dark. Makes sense. But for a rodent, it's all about smell, so their sleep is all broken up and influenced by odors. Bats, their sleep is scheduled around specific windows of sound for hunting. And then you get dolphins. They're dealing with the constant physical strain of swimming, so they actually sleep with one half of their brain at a time. Incredible. What this tells us so clearly is that, yeah, the master clock is always there in the background. but the specific kind of daily strain an animal deals with, whether it's visual or smell or sound or physical movement, that plays a massive role in shaping how and when it sleeps. It's all about managing whatever your dominant sensory load is.
Now let's bring this right up to the present day, because there's a cutting-edge discovery that adds some serious weight to this whole idea of strain and load.
Just recently, a paper published in the journal iScience gave us some hard data that really changes how we think about the actual mechanics of deep sleep. So what these researchers found is that the slow waves that define deep sleep, they don't just move along some fixed hardwired path in the brain. Instead, and I'm quoting here, they are dynamically guided by excitability gradients. Put simply, whatever part of your brain is the most energized or excitable at the end of the day, that's the part that takes the lead and steers the entire brain into its sleep rhythm. And boom, here's where it all connects. The neuroscience says the most excitable part of the brain leads the charge. And the BKM gives us the reason why that region is so excitable in the first place. It's a direct result of those stress-strain clouds that built up during the day. So, if you spent all day reading, your visual cortex has the most strain, it's the most excitable, and so it's the part that leads your brain into sleep. It just fits perfectly. So, what we have here are two different models, two different languages, describing the exact same thing. And to really make this new understanding useful, we need a way to translate between them. We need a kind of sleep Rosetta Stone. This last part is all about giving you a practical tool. We're going to directly translate the physical, mechanical terms of the brain kinematics model into the biochemical language of neuroscience that you might be more familiar with. Check it out. This is the translation key. When the BKM talks about residual strains, it's really just describing adenosine buildup, which is what creates that feeling of sleep pressure. When it says strain absorption saturation, that's just a new way of saying you've hit your sleep pressure threshold. And those stress clouds we keep talking about? In neuroscience, those are known as cortical activation fields. You see, it's not a new biology. It's just a new, and I think a way more intuitive language to describe the biology we already knew was there. And why does this matter? Because it completely reframes how you can think about your own energy and exhaustion. That feeling of being totally mentally fried, you're not just tired. You can now think about it in physical terms. Your brain has literally reached its strain absorption limit for the day. It makes that exhaustion feel real, physical, and manageable. And so that brings us to our final question for you. Now that you know your need for sleep is this constant, dynamic balance between the clock and the load, how are you going to think about managing your own daily stream to get better rest and recovery?